house, to look at its infrastructure, if you will. And as that happens, you begin to look at the structure of the white wall that you saw before, and you're in those sort of classical games where art is, in the past, would reveal, for instance, the stretcher, the frame on which the canvas is stretched, where minimal artists would gesture toward the gallery in which the work was placed, and indeed toward all the different systems which sustain that gallery and the different, this is really the strong side of minimal art, right? I mean, when you would be invited to analyze the gallery not as an abstract space, but rather as a space that's actually located in a technological city. And this same gesture is being carried out here, and yet it has a wealth of precise content that goes beyond almost anything that was ever done with pretty much the same vocabulary in the late 60s and early 70s. And so that kind of returns to my initial remark, which shows that there's been a real development of this idiom, and that it's actually quite a powerful language when it comes to introducing people to this idea of opening up the black box, of trying to actively explore the what you could think of as the enigma of the way that we're being governed, or what you could think of, I think, in a more powerful sense, as a variety of the social unconscious. I think this is really where it becomes the most interesting, is to think that we're in the grip of processes which at once involve individual people directly, whether they're on the giving or the receiving end, whether they're at the high, in the towers of the center city, or on the edges of the kind of vast suburbs. We're all involved in processes which at once are essentially part of our lives, even part of our daily lives, but which are largely not just out of our control, but outside of our capacity to perceive. And in that sense, become to us unconscious in the sense that they are always accompanying us, but we are not able to name them, and we are only able to feel their presence as something which moves through us and tends to escape, tends to move through us almost like a natural force. So I think that by reaching the point where you call it the social unconscious, it becomes even more powerful as an invitation to explore what's going on. And this is being carried out with the language of art. Then, just to kind of finish an imaginary circulation through the exhibition, one is confronted with something really weird, which is this animal from the zoo, apparently. A rhinoceros. It doesn't really look like an animal. It looks like a piece of art, really, or sculpture, or you wonder if is it actually alive? And then you look closely at it, and there's moisture at the nostrils, But can it really be alive? It looks as though it's been painted. It looks like it was a piece of bronze that's had some kind of patina. It seems to be a surrealist exploration of a possible animal in a possible place. And if you dig into it and you start to read about it, then you find out that it was its location in the German city of Nuremberg is inspired by the drawings that Dürer made, not of it and not of any animal he ever saw, but of reports that such animals existed in a distant past, And so you seem to have one of those things where art is offering something completely other, where you're being confronted with, well, maybe this is another world from that one we were just talking about. And in many ways, I think it is. I think it is another world, and this is something not to forget, that other sensory and imaginary experiences are entirely possible and can be created, and one can create them, and when you create them and confront the world of today and its major manifestations and its dominant manifestations, and when you confront the dominant forms of representation and the way that our imaginaries are structured through this world on a screen with an artistic other, of course, that's something very powerful. But at the same time, one reflects that this image of otherness, this image of animal life, this image of an animal from a almost, one would have to somehow walk through the invisible door to actually reach the jungle where such an animal could live. I mean, it's clearly another world. But at the same time, it's connected through art to the period of European colonialism. So it's connected to the gift by some Oriental king or emperor of such an animal to the king of Portugal, if I recall correctly, and then the rumors that spread through Europe, and then the attempts based on travelers' tales and so on and so forth by Dürer to represent this unseen and unknown animal. And it's ultimately that which has motivated the presence of the real animal in the zoo. So you can see that the most distant worlds and the ones that we can counterpose to the extremely artificial forms of representation and perception and self-perception that are generated in the financial markets, those others are also connected to very artificial forms of representation and perception and self-perception. And we have in the world of art, if we would use it, a kind of theater or a kind of experimental space in which the two things, the world of representation and the world of reality, can be confronted. Only now we can see that there isn't just one world of representation and one world of reality, but rather a vast possible range. So that if we take it that way, when we go to a museum or we go into any cultural space, we're not necessarily going to flee from reality and experience a purely imaginary world, nor are we going to come close to reality as though through a magnifying glass or a microscope or a telescope or some such optical instrument, but instead we're entering these realms to embark upon an urgent but also very, very typically human comparison between different possibilities of the structuration of reality by the imaginary realm and the structuration of the imaginary by reality. In other words, if you look, and as I walked out, I took a moment to look back at just at the wall, you know, that temporary wall that's been placed, where you have like a white paint, and you can look at it and you just see almost like a line, like a receding line, this surface of white paint from which the black screens emerged. And I thought, well, what I'm looking at is not the dividing line between art and reality, where you would look at the art on this side and then you see, oh, that's the structure, and then here's the real infrastructure that's holding it up, and that's the message. That doesn't seem to be the message at all of the work, because when you go behind, there is nothing behind. There are just a few cables just connecting the screens, which in fact are turned off to the electric current. You don't see the infrastructure of the financial markets or something when you look behind the wall, but you do see a relation between the representation and actually what it constructs, because the very activity of representation has constructed this wall. And in fact, I think this is how symbolic activity really works. It's constructive. It is an operator of the real. So we're being asked to look at activity which is symbolic, which is artistic, which is artificial, which is at the limit imaginary, as a constructive operator or transformer of what we think of as the material world. And I find that extremely challenging and extremely promising also, that in a situation like this you can achieve, yeah, we might open the door or something for a little air in this material world of ours. That would be a good idea. And it's a perfect moment for that too, because